Welcome to this week's exciting edition of your favorite program, Yilungelo, Lakho. It's your right. Uyazi sinilethela lona la kumamba phambili SABC 1 eMzansi for sure. Umajala umazikala ushongololo ngisaba kulibamba usefikile officially in the SABC building and we are live in studio ngashayela ke ucingo. The magic numbers 011-714-6918, alternatively 714-6919. consumer@sabc.co.za is our email address. Have so tholakele futhi ku Facebook. Now, Mbukele, in an effort to try and alleviate some of the financial blows that has left many with little or nothing to survive on as a result of COVID-19, our party are looking at giving consumers access to parts of their pension. Mbukele uhulumeni ucabanga phela ukuthi avumele abasebenzi ukuthi bathole okuncane kwempesheni yabo ukuze phela bakwazi ukuthi bamelane nesimo esenziwe umnotho njengoba sikhona ke sikule simo sa COVID-19. Mbukele asihlale phezulu kodaba letla namhlanje sidingide lolu daba in further detail. Well, it is often said that desperate times call for desperate measures. Yes, well, the ravaging effects of the COVID-19 pandemic has now put South Africa at a point of deciding whether to allow people to withdraw parts of their pension before retirement or not. Well, as you would imagine, views are quite mixed around the issue. So government has a balancing act to do on this one. But taking a bite now into your future savings raises far-reaching financial implications in Mbukeli. Ngaphambi kokuthi sikhulume kabanzi ngeinyathelo zokuthi kuzokwenziwa kanjani. Ake sizwe ukuthi nina nithini.
UMzansi Afrika ujongene nemeko yoqoqosho eyoyikekayo. Wayefutule ngumphathi wezimali uthi uncedo lungafumaneka xa kunokuqongqothwa uvimba ogcina imali zomhlala phansi.
There's a matter which seems to be stuck somewhere in the system. It's a matter which has to do with making an allowance for workers to have access to a percentage of their retirement funds in these times of difficulty. It's a matter that has been discussed at NEDLEC ad nauseum, and I am now determined more than ever before to ensure that the officials in the National Treasury and other relevant officials speed up this matter. A portion of their retirement fund workers should be able to access in these difficult times, maybe to finish off their bond repayments, maybe to sort out whatever debt positions they might be in.
Esibhengezo sibona njengento ezakuzisa isiqabu kwabo bakwimeko enzima kwasezimalini. Kodwa bakhimkhanya boqoqosho bathi urhulumente kufuneka achule ukunyathela xa eza kuvumela abantu ukuba bacuntsule kwimadlana egcinelwe umhla wokuhlala phansi. Imbi yokuba bambi baya kuyithatha le mali ingazenzi izicwangciso eziluqilima.
Bese kuba nenkinga ezizoqhamuka from lokho ezifana nokuthi uyithatha le mali uzoyisebenzisa kanjani, wenzani ngayo, ukhokha izikweletu uyayithatha nje uyitamuzela uyidle leyo mali iphele ngemva kwenyanga ezimbalwa. Yila ngibona ngathi uhulumeni kuzomela anqume ngokuhlakanipha ukuthi leyo mali umezoyikhipha abadedela abantu bayithathe. Akube nemigomo nemibandela eshoyo ukuthi le mali isetshenziswa kanjani.
Umbutho wabasebenzi South African Federation of Trade Unions liqhwebela izandla elinyathelo. Lithi kungcono kunokuba abantu bathi benamatyala abazibone bebalekela ezibhankini okanye komatshonisa.
The finance capital currently is actually exploiting workers higher than you would expect. The loans which workers take from these banks are charged at very compounded interests, the interests of machonistas and loan sharks, obviously they are at a very high, we don't even have to check that whether they are in compliance with the repo rate or not. Those ones are at all times inflated. So this is a better offer in a sense for workers to access, because it would mean they would not be indebted into something that would eventually not be able to pay.
Phambi kokuba abantu bavunyelwe ukuba bacuntsuleke imali zomhlala phansi kufuneka kutshintshe umthetho kuqala. Kodwa ayikuye wonke ubani olithakazelayo elinyathelo. Khumbula ngexesha abantu befuna imali zabo emva kuyeka phambi kwexesha engqeshweni, uninzi lwaphinda lwabuyela. Ezomkhumbulo zisahleli kwabanye.
Mina ngicabanga ukuthi basinikeze imali zethu mase siqedile kahle, mase ngicede 65 or 60. Because khona manje sesiqualifya ngowo 55 futhi. Ingcono kanjalo, hayi ukuthi base basinikeze imali yethu sisasebenza. Ngiyakutshela ukuthi ngingahlala 2 weeks ngayo bese iphelile.
It depends from one individual to the next, yabo, because abanye abantu basase young, they can still accumulate. But for abantu asebebadala, they need to be cautious ukuthi lento bayenza kanjani, and what does it mean, ama implications in the long term.
My advice will be to people, leave that money as it is until you retire.
Into engiyibonayo apho wena mfowethu, ndibona ngazuthi ufaka abantu emgibeni. Mandithi ufaka abantu emgibeni wena mfowethu, because people, they are going to take too much of their money and misused it.
I think it's a good idea, because if you borrow money, you don't borrow it. Do you borrow it like you take it? Then you continue working. That means you can settle all your debts, then go on about your life as usual. I mean, it's a good idea. Why not? Yeah.
But some people say that it will affect the amount of money you will receive when you retire.
But the amount of money you're going to receive was going to help you anyway. You're going to use it for other things. Why not use it now? I mean, you can't be driving your car or you build the house you always wanted to build when you're old. Why not live your life now?
Interesting reviews, Mbukeleni. Manje-ke ukhuluma abanzi phela ngodaba lethu. Let's welcome our guest today via Skype. Sinaye Mr. Xante Baye. Yena-ke he's an economist, and as well as Ubabu Matthew Parks okhulumela inhlangano yabasebenzi iCOSATU. Mr. Parks, thank you so much for joining us, sir. Very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon, Xante and the viewers. Thank you for having us.
Siyabonga kakhulu baba. Xante Baye, siyakwamukela Nsizwa. I know you're an economic researcher, but angazi ukuthi sizothi we specialist se-economy sezomnotho. Thank you so much, Nsizwa, for joining us. Xante, maybe just from you, very quick reactions from i-insert lesibonile. Mixed reviews. A lot of people, of course, bafila ukuthi le mali le kumele ibekwe up until they retire because people will use it carelessly, whereas others feel that, you know, it's going to come in handy, particularly at this time, COVID.
Yes, I think it's a very, the mixed reactions actually make a lot of sense to me, because one of the important things as a finances jongoguti, kungani abantu besezingxakini zemali abakuzo. And then we actually direct ourselves to the real problems of that have caused the indebtedness. Rather than ukuthi sithi abantu mabakhuphe imali zabo ebefanele ukuthi basebenzise uma bethatha umhlalaphansi, because ingxaki yethu abazayifumana ukuthi befika isikhathi sokuthatha umhlalaphansi babe ngenayo imali eyanele. Siyazi ukuthi abantu abaninzi ngoku sesiphila ixesha isikhathi eside kakhulu, we go as far as 80, 90. So it is important that we actually make sure that people, because people are going to live long, that money that they will need for the many, many years that they're going to be alive is actually sufficient. And so we must unlock the problems why people have found themselves in debt, especially working people. Working people should not find themselves in the kind of situation they are in. So the intervention, but I don't because in 5 years from now, we're going to have to find this problem is going to actually persist again, because we're going to have to ask again from people to actually do the same, because we will not have solved the problem. So this debt problem is going to be a cycle until we actually make a plan on how we actually find a staying and permanent solution to the reasons why workers are actually in such dire straits and are actually in such problems while they actually have jobs and they're actually working.
Very interesting ukuthi usho njalo wena Xanti, because siyazi ukuthi i-COVID has crippled a lot of abantu abaningi balahlekelwe imisebenzi. But let me go to Mr. Parks. Mr. Parks, listen, mixed reviews obviously from the public on this move, but I know for a fact that COSATU has called for the 30% access to people's pension funds. Please tell us what informed this decision, sir.
Sure, thanks. Well, look, we raised this as COSATU with the Minister of Finance in May last year at the beginning of the lockdown, when 2.2 million workers had lost their jobs, but also millions of workers had lost wages. They were struggling. The UF was taking a significant amount of time to get money to people's pockets. Yet workers have got significant amount of savings in their pension funds. So we said, let's find the right balance, because right now workers can access the pension fund. If they lose their job or if they resign, then they can cash out the entire pension fund. We're trying to find the right balance between allowing workers some sort of relief, whether it's during the COVID, whether they've lost wages, whether they're highly indebted, or they're supporting relatives who have lost jobs, or they just need to attend to some sort of domestic emergency like medical bills, etc. Allow them between 30% and 30,000 rand from their savings, just to manage the time, and yet preserve the remaining for the pension funds. And look, we need to get the right balance, because there's no point of saving if you're starving today. And workers can access the pension fund. So we're trying to avoid the worst of both scenarios. We're saying, let's give some limited relief. It should be meaningful enough to provide relief to these families, but let's not deplete the pension funds either, because most workers, when they do hit retirement, they can't afford to retire. So we need to find the right balance. So we were quite pleased when the Minister of Finance last week reaffirmed his support for this proposal of COSATU. He in fact actually said in October last year at Parliament in the budget statement he was going to work on it. Treasury was going to draft a bill. Unfortunately, that has not happened. So we're quite pleased when he made the noise. Of course, now the minister has left cabinet. So we'll have to have the new proposal with Comrade Yilungelo quite soon, because it takes time to draft amendment to laws. It's not a thing which happens overnight. So you can't go on Saturday to the ATM to cash out. It'll take about a year and a half to go through. But I think you must find the right balance, because as Planty is saying, there will always be a crisis, whether you are indebted, you have a medical emergency for your wife, or whatever the story is. So the idea is to say, can we divide the pensions into two pots? 1/3 should be a savings pot where you can access it in times of need for you, and the other 2/3 should be in your pension pot where you wouldn't access it unless you hit retirement age, etc. So we think that kind of idea is the right approach, to find the right balance between the two.
Kanti, I mean, we know about Mzansi, I mean, we have a history, we have a poor savings culture. We know South Africans literally, when it comes to money, they cannot keep money. And COVID has just exacerbated a situation in Zabantu. But when do you think the 30% that is being proposed by COSATU, at least it's a portion of a pension yomntu, so it's not the entire package retire. Do you think it's feasible, and do you think the situation is that dire to necessitate such a move?
Well, there are a number of considerations. The first one, of course, is that, as I say, 30% of what amount of money? I guess, depending on what it is, I still think that it's an important thing when you start to think about, savings are a fraction of your income.
Yes.
You don't save what you don't have. When you're under a lot of distress, and the savings that we're discussing here are what we would, I guess, forced savings or mandatory savings, because you have not just but to put something in the pension fund, because it's actually in part of how you employ. The employer will put in something, you'll put in something. It gets deducted before the money lands in your hands, as opposed to the other kinds of savings that, for example, people who actually have excess funds or leftover money after you spend are talking about. And I think a lot of people like to pretend as if actually people don't save because actually they like to spend. But there are few people who are spending on luxuries. They're spending on things that they actually need, including supporting extended family members, members of the family, spouses that may not work at the time, all of those kinds of things. So the pressures that people face are such that there are actually no leftover incomes. And I think this has been borne out very much by actually what you see in terms of what in pay slips of people. There's been a number of studies that actually show that people cannot afford to save because they can hardly actually buy, for example, a house that we think about, for example, a house as building of wealth, as what you would think about as saving. So, and people can't afford even to buy houses because They are so indebted that they are in credit bureaus and all of that. And so I think we should do away with the idea that people don't save because, you know, they like to spend and all of that. But what we have a problem with is actually a number of needs that come to the small incomes. That's why I say one of the key things I would have liked the finance minister to do, and I suspect also, you know, COSAT itself, is to actually help lean into, I mean, COSAT obviously on a yearly basis, on a periodic basis, will come and talk to his workers who actually complain about how little their workers get paid. How do we lean into the problem actually of incomes that don't fill? And I think part of that has to do actually with our, you know, with our social wage. When you talk about the social wages, how much it costs, for example, for you to get to work, that very, very high cost. I would have liked the minister to say, we are going to address in this time or in the long term, how are we actually going to deal with those things? Of course, as an immediate measure, given the pressures that we face, I think it's an idea that we cannot run away from because people are under an immense pressure at the moment. So we can't run away from it as a measure that we have to undertake today. But I think it's also important to say, now that we would have taken care of this, we know we're going to be here in 3 to 5 months. Let's deal with that situation.
Matthew, what do you think about this? I mean, Kanti seems to think that, you know, we need to look at the mitigating factors as to why workers that do have jobs are in such crippling conditions. I mean, do you think this is going to aid the situation, though, to go back and try engage what those issues are instead of trying to try and fix the problem with what is going on at the moment? Because I understand you guys are calling for this as purely as a measure, right, for the COVID-19 relief measures, right, sir?
Look, we think we need to do a variety of things because there's different problems, different contexts. So we think right now, given that we're in the deepest recession in 100 years, given that 2.2 million people lost their jobs last year, albeit some were recovered, millions have lost wages even though they kept their jobs, given that unemployment is 43%, so even those who are lucky to have jobs that are on decent paying ones have to support relatives who have lost wages, etc. So we need to give some relief for people to survive through this difficult period. But also, look, many workers, as Kanti is saying, are highly indebted. Even public servants, for example, are extremely indebted. We do have to address those issues. Some of it is because people are abused by the financial lending institutions who often ignore the National Credit Act. They often charge you through your mashonisas, your loan sharks, exorbitant interest rates, and government needs to crack down on that regard. We think there is, as Kanti is also saying, that a need for, what do you call it, consumer civic education, to educate workers, to advise them about their rights, how to try to manage their affairs. And I think this is a thing that everybody has experienced, whether you're working class, you're middle class, people are taken advantage of. You find in your cell phone payments, in your insurance payments, in your loans, there's a lot of dubious pilferage there. You find a lot of people taking money from workers' pockets.
All right.
But also it speaks to the issue of unemployment. If people are unemployed, they will struggle. We need to address those issues.
Absolutely. All right. Let's hold it there for now, Mr. Parks. Mbukeli ake siphuthume ngasezitolo. Nathi ke siyokhokha intela. Remember those numbers 0117146918, alternatively 7146919. consumer@sabc.co.za. Siyatholakala futhi ku Facebook Yilungelo Lakho live on SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. Welcome back on Yilungelo Lakho. Manje ke sikhuluma ngeinyathelo phela ezithathwa ugovernment ukuthi azame ukuthi anikeze nini abasebenzi iaccess towards imali zenu zempesheni njengoba phela sibona ukuthi siphila ezikhathini ezinzima ze-COVID. Sinabo ke amagesi studio. Sinayo ubaba Matthew Parks, who is the COSATU parliamentary coordinator, alongside economic researcher, i-researcher ezomnotho ngithetha ngoXhanti Pai. Xhanti, maybe let's get back to you. I mean, let's talk about Ilokozana, the confusion when it comes to Uguti, this move then would have on taxation year pension. How do you then explain that to a layman? Because bayazuba pension is out tax, and then if you get this 30%, say it is approved, what happens to that taxation issue?
So I can't really help you with all the taxation legislation, but I think the Minister of Finance, of course, is very capable of dealing with these issues, because actually going into issues of tax law and the bill Mr. Parks was telling us minister when he's putting this thing together, athi uzawulungiselela ukuthi le mali uma iphuma iphelele injalo ukuze abantu bangalahlekelwa, because uma uyikhupha imali yakho kwangoku uzolahlekelwa yenye yayo, so kufanele ungalahlekelwa imali ikwazi ukuthi iphumele wena yonke, kwazi uba uzokwazi uvala kwezo ndawo kuthiwa ufune kuvale kuyo, kunoba siphinde siyithathe le mali siyi-tax iphinde ibuyele back kuhulumeni. So eyona nto siyifunayo uba xa iphuma imali mayiphume ngolo hlobo. So kuzawunyanzeleka ukuthi in part of the considerations ezenziwa nguminister, uminister akhawuleze akwazi uba uyazilungisa zonke izinto ezinxamnye ne-tax, kwazi uba nemali iphume izokwazi yonke le misebenzi. Siyazi ukuthi if mhlawumbe uya i-early retirement okanye uya-taking part idla ngokuthi i-tax imali yakho uma usithi mhlawumbe if you are moving from, for example, from one job to another, siyakwazi ukuthi uba uye wayithatha imali yakho ye-pension kudle uyadla ngoluza enye imali through taxes. So uba le ndlela ifuna ukuncintisana nabantu, uzawunyanzeleka ukuthi urhulumente athi loo mali uyithathayo, loo nxa uyithathayo uyithatha iphelele nje kuloo ndawo, i-tax bangayithathi, kwazi uba izokwazi ukuba nima ifikele ezandleni zakho. So yenye yezinto urhulumente afuneka azijongile, and nezinto i-organization njengokhosathi ufuna zincedisa abasebenzi ngayo uba ithi xa iphuma le mali izophuma injalo iphelele.
You know, we had Mbugeli asked for Treasury to join us in studio, but unfortunately, namhlanje abazange bakhona. We've been calling them up until the last minute, just before the show started, and it would have been interesting to just get their view. Mr. Parks, maybe just save us here. So I've just asked Khandi about this. I mean, there seems to be a lot of confusion around this move, particularly when it comes to the taxation of the funds. I mean, how would this move then posture against that? Khandi says he can't help us much there, but he's given us a pretty good analysis of what he feels should be done. And he feels that as the organizations that are pushing for this move, like COSATU, have you considered such problems or such, what am I saying? I'm running out of words. Have you considered that there could be problems resulting in this move when in relation to the tax of the funds?
Yeah, no, look, we made proposals because currently right now your pensions are tax exempt as part of government's effort to incentivize, to encourage people to put aside money for pensions for retirement. And of course, normally when you, as clients say, when you resign from your job or you lose your job and you cash out your pension, you normally then get hit by taxation because Treasury is then clawing back the tax that you had actually saved on before. What we've said right now is two options because there's still a discussion. There's nothing concrete on table yet. There's no new bill on paper yet. So it's still being discussed. We've said, look, we think right now when workers are accessing part of these monies to address emergencies, government shouldn't be whittling down it further. They shouldn't be taking tax from it. Because, for example, if a worker is taking out 30,000 Rand to settle a medical bill, and then if government then takes 10,000 Rand for tax, you actually make it more difficult for workers. But we do appreciate that government is going to tell us, well, you've received a tax benefit, now you're cashing out. You can't have you can't have both slices of cake. We think a compromise could be that if government must claw back some of the tax, it should be at a lesser rate. So we don't really have a situation where government profiteers out of workers' miseries. But look, right now, I think it's important to stress right now that this is a discussion. There is no bill yet on paper. And all these kind of technicalities, the different options must still be fleshed out between Treasury, between business, between Labour and NEDLAC. And we hope it can be done quite soon to give kind of clarity and certainty to everybody from government, which needs to know its tax projections, but also more importantly, to workers who are trying to see what can be done to help you right now. And I must say, we've been flooded with calls from workers who are really desperate. So when government takes long, it just frustrates workers even greater.
Kanti, I mean, in kwamanye amazwe, do you know of any other country that practices imove efana nalena ukubana banikeze abasebenzi babo access to pension yabo? I don't know if I was reading correctly. Xa besithi Canada is one of those states abanikeza abantu access to their pension funds. And do you think ukuthi iyasebenza?
No, I'm not particularly a specialist on this or financial advice, so I don't have a lot of experience in this case. But I think I will say this, that one of the key things that other countries have been very clear about doing, and this is why, for example, things like this haven't happened, is that, and this has been developed in South Africa, but not actually taken to the point where it should. For example, one of the things the minister announces is that if you wanted to finish your bond or you wanted to buy a house, for example, you could take some of your pension. In other countries, there is such a thing as, for example, a pension guarantee scheme. So actually, it allows that pension, pension yakho ukuthi ikusebenzele mhlawumbe guarantee ukuthi ukwazi ukuboleka imali.
You're moving off screen. Yes, I can see you now. Please stay there. Our viewers would like to see and hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Then that uba uyakwazi amanye ukuthi bakho lento ye-pension guarantee kwazi ukuthi uba mhlawumbe ufuna uboleka imali or ukwazi usebenzisa i-pension yakho mhlawumbe uboleka imali uze uyobhadala and laa nto iyakuncedisa ke ngoba i-interest rate yakho ibe sezantsi so uyakwazi uboleka ngayo ukwazi uba uyovala mhlawumbe loo matyala akho ane-high interest. Yayazi yeyona ngxaki yabasebenzi kakhulu eMzantsi Afrika uba anala matyala kuthiwa zilanto zi-personal loans. La matyala azi-personal loans ane-interest ephezulu kakhulu edla ngobetha abantu. So uba uyakwazi ukuboleka against your pension ukuthi no ndinayo i-pension fund ngiyakwazi uboleka nje kwazi uba if andibhatali then ngingakwazi ukuclaima kwi-pension yam. Loo nto ngoku idla ngokuthiwa at least it's not unsecured debt, it's secured debt and idla ngokufumaneka at a lower rate. Zezinye zingcabanga besithi mhlawumbe kufuneka sizifake ukuthi abantu bakule ngxaki bakho mhlawumbe ufuna uthenga indlu okanye ufuna ubhatala amanye amatyala okanye ufuna uconsolidate usebenzise pension yakho ukuthi uvale mhlawumbe ufumane if amatyala akho pha a-50,000 uthathe le 50,000 from i-pension ikubhatalele loo matyala but as a loan so that wena ugqibezele pha iyazi uba iloan yakho yona ise-safe, i-pension yakho ise-safe ayikayitouch isezawuncedakala ukuthi ibe i-pension yakho senayo.
In fact, Kanti, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Mr. Parks, very interesting. I mean, the DA, if we bring the political side of things into it, not too much though, we're a consumer show. I mean, the DA is proposing exactly what Kanti is saying. They're saying that they would like it to be a loan guarantee so that people can then settle their debt. Is this the same view that COSATU has?
Yes, no, thanks. So look, we raised this issue also at Parliament last year in our submissions on the budget to Parliament. And we were quite pleased when the DA responded, one of the members of Parliament responded with a draft bill. It basically says allow workers or pensioners to access up to 3/4 of their pension in the form of a loan. So we had made a submission on it. What we said, look, we think that allowing workers 75% of the pension funds is too high. You're going to deplete the pension funds. There's going to be a liquidity challenge. It will also mean when those workers hit retirement age, they have very, very little to survive on. So hence we propose a lower amount of 30% or 30,000 Rand, whichever is greater. I think Treasury's thought is around the same with their 1/3, 2/3 proposal. But also what we've said is that, look, under the law right now, you can take a loan out from your pension fund for a home loan, for property loans. We said, look, allow workers the choice between a loan for whatever purpose,
like
or
loan,
but also allow workers the choice between a cash withdrawal because many workers are highly indebted. So adding more loans and more debt is not going to help us, just kicking the can down the road. So allow workers the choice, depending on their personal circumstance, between a loan for any purpose or a simple cash withdrawal. Leave it up to them to decide what is in their best interest.
All right, let's leave it there for now, gentlemen. We're going to talk about ukuthi kahle ubani ngempela ongaba ne-access kule mali. Well, who do they want ukuthi abe ne-access kule mali? Is it everybody or is it just those people that are highly indebted? 011-714-6918, 011-714-6919. Consumer at sabc.co.za. Siyabuya ngabaleli khefu. COSATU kanye namanye ama-parties ezepolitiki bayapropose ukuthi uhulumeni akwazi ukuthi anikeze i-access to ama-pension funds. Wena sisho-ke mbukela ukuthi lento izokwenzeka. It's still in the pipeline njengobesho ubaba Matthew Parks we-COSATU ukuthi le ndaba le isadingidwa because kusazomela ukuthi kushintshe nomthetho ukuze le ndaba idlule through abo-Netlek, through iParliament. Let's now take your first caller on the line, Mam John, all the way in Soweto. Mam John, ngiyabonga ntokazi ukubamba ucingo siyakwamukela ohlelweni. Singakusiza kanjani namhlanje?
Sanibonani nonke.
Hello ma, kunjani?
Siyaphila ma, kunjani?
Siyaphila ma.
Siswa mina bengithi I do agree ukuthi at least abantu bazama ukuthi babe nayo i-access kwi-pension fund yabo.
Yes.
Talking from the experience ukuthi now I'm now a pensioner, and now at the end of the day sifumana ukuthi as sibe nezikweleti ezininzi sifanele ngibhadale imoto ngapha fanele ngithenge indlu. Imagine manje masengizokuthi ngina 60-65 khona ngi-enjoya isikhathi sokuthi ngithenge indlu. 3 years down the line angisayi-enjoy leyo ndlu leyo ngiyashona or something happens to me ngenxa yokugula. So I would advise mina ukuthi kungaba kuhle ukuthi once laba basakhona ukusebenza besanomsebenzi mabakhona ukuthi babe nayo i-access, bakhona ukuthi bathenge izindlu, basettlise imoto ukuthi by the time befika kwi-age ye-pension at least bazo-enjoya imali yabo ye-pension sebezi ukuthi bane-shelter.
Okay ma, siyabonga kakhulu Mam John. Very interesting ilokhuzana imbono lapha kama uma uyavuma yena uyavumela ukuthi abantu banikezwe leli thuba lokuthi babe ne-access to a certain percentage yamalokhuzana e-pension yabo because uyazi ukuthi izinto ziyenzeka emhlabeni and people want to ukuthi benze whatever best they can do ukuthi to remedy those situations as esho ukuthi banezikweletu, banezindlu, banama-loans that they want to settle. Now, Mr. Parks, I mean, are you proposing this for every worker, or you saying those workers that say, can we have a choice because we've got loans to settle, as our callers just mentioned? I mean, she agrees with the move. She fully supports the move. She says it's a great move. She's talking from as a pensioner herself. And she says that, you know what, it would be nice to have, you know, access to that money before. I mean, she says she would have loved to have access to her money before actually settling for her pension because she would have settled her house. She would have paid other debts that she had, you know. So, I mean, talk to us about that, sir.
Sure. Look, when we originally proposed it last year in May at the height of the lockdown, we had really looked at workers who were waiting for the UIF COVID-19 TERS money, which was delayed for some time. And we wanted to provide quick solutions. But when we had engagement with Treasury, they said, look, this is going to take a year and a half to amend the laws, etc. So we said, look, it's still important because we won't just have a crisis today because of COVID-19. None of us could predict the violence of KZN and Gauteng a month ago. We don't know what will happen next year or in future years. So we need to have a vehicle which allows workers in the moment of need, whether it's a personal need of highly indebted, whether it's a medical need of the wife, whether it's whatever story might have affected them. Let's have a vehicle which allows those workers the choice. It shouldn't be too technical in terms of you don't want government or the pension fund to be policing you as to what constitutes an emergency. Let's make it the option of the worker to choose, and let's allow it for all workers, because to be honest with you, virtually all workers in South Africa are highly indebted. Most workers don't have medical aid, will have medical emergencies. Most workers will have unemployed relatives, spouses or children who they need to help. So let's give this vehicle as a permanent tool, which allows workers when they have a moment of need, they have an emergency access. So they don't need to go run around to the loan sharks, give the ID, give their car keys or the furniture or whatever. They can have a safe way of accessing their money, not government's money, and they can do so in a way which won't negatively impact upon their future too much. And I think with the twin savings route, a third for emergency savings and then 2/3 for your pension fund, I think that finds the right balance. So workers can always rest assured that, yes, I'm saving for my pension, but I always know that if there's an emergency, I don't need to go to the loan shark. I don't need to sell my fridge or my car. I have a way out of a crisis.
Or even myself. Let's take uThokozani from Springs on the line. Thokozani, so akwamukela nsizwa ohleleni ungabeka umbono noma umbuzo baba. Thokozani? Uyangisaba manje uButhokozani.
Yebo mfisi ngiyakuzwa.
Bese ngithi uyangisaba nsizwa. Welcome to Yilungelo Lakho nsizwa. Ungabeka umbono noma umbuzo. Awungisabi.
Hayi ngingayisabani intokazi enjengawe kodwa.
Go ahead nsizwa. Uthini wena uthi uyangikhiphela ke ipension ukuthi ukhokha amalobolo or uyokhokha ibond ucabangani wena nsizwa?
Cha mina ngibona lento lena ingewona umqondo ophusile kahle hle.
Ngobani baba?
Ngoba ekugcineni kosuku eSouth Africa sinenkinga ye-corruption.
Eish.
Njengoba sinenkinga ye-corruption kangaka nje kuzogcina kunanenkinga yezibhoki kukhona abantu aba-accessa imali ekugcineni kuzoba khona abantu abazofuna imali zabo baye ku-pension kuthiwa isikhwama sabasebenzi sesi-dry. Umbuzo-ke uthi-ke ekugcineni ngaleso sikhathi ngoba sekuyogcina kunenkombankombane sekuthiwa abantu abadlelezo imali bahamba amacala thina-ke zobe sesifuna imali zethu emakhaya zizobuyaphi?
Siyabonga kakhulu Baba Thokozani. Thank you so much. A very valid point there that Baba Thokozani is raising. Is saying that there's a lot of corruption in this country and both abantu sebethathile imali bazidla benkantolo abantu bobe besele bengenazo imali. Let's take another quick ad break. Mbukeli ungayi indawo. The numbers will be on your screen. Ungayi indawo. Sadingida udaba lokuthi phela kubekwe udaba ukuthi abantu babe ne-access yey'mali zabo zama-pension kodwa ke le ndaba it's still in talks mbukeli asisho ukuthi ugovernment useyivumile njengoba sixoxa ke nobaba Matthew Parks weCOSATU kanye noXhanti Pai who's an economic researcher. All right, we do have Harold on the line. Harold, thank you so much for calling in. Where are you calling from? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, my sister.
Usekimbali Nsizwa, thank you so much for joining us. When uthini body?
Ngothi mina Marekani ngiya eMpumalanga.
Okay.
Yeah, ngithi it's a good idea uthi government allow abasebenzi to access ama pension wabo. Example, mina like I was raised in the poverty stricken line in Mpumalanga.
Yes.
I'm the first guy who sebenza ekhaya. I had to take loans after loans to build a house ekhaya. A bank you need a loan with 27% interest. But if you also can access imali zethu pension, we are going to avoid lendaba yokuthola loan in the higher interest. Ngapha fanele sithathe abantwana bekithi sibafake inkolo. We don't have that money because sinama loan on top of the loan. So if yes, so I think it's a good idea so that ngizothatha imali ngibhadela amaloni ngistarte afresh life.
Sabonga kakhulu Babu Harold from Ekimbali. Gentlemen, let me also take some Facebook messages that are coming in here. Moses Nkosi says the country's economy is crawling from walking and running because of the government politics and the general dealings with said foreigners. And then who's this one? Chisa Mhlonyane says they must give us up to 50% because that is our money. Kanti, listening to our callers that are calling in, I mean, abanye basabi corruption, abanye bati, you know what, it's a good idea because at the end of the day, siyasebenza, by the time we tola le pension, you are too old, you can't enjoy it. So what's the point? While I'm still working.
iyavakala msasa. I think that eyona nto ibalulekileyo ukuthi sijongane nengxaki ukuthi uba mhlawumbe umuntu uyayinika imali uyisebenzisa phi. Siyazi siyakwazi ukuthi sometimes ngabantu abamnyama mhlawumbe sithi no sizobuyisa ubaba sizobuyisa okanye kuzovula ilitshe likabani yabona sometimes imali iyalahleka ngolo hlobo. Beninokuthi eyona nto ibalulekileyo ekakhulu ebesetshilo nomethi ukuthi abantu abaninzi bazofumana i-financial advice kwazi basizolungisa le ndawo kanye ibiyingxaki ukuze umuntu aphile lapho. Sometimes abantu abaninzi bakuthi abazazi sometimes ezinye opportunities zikhona izikills ezikhoyo kurhulumente kakhulu but ke nabanye abasebenzi bangasifana nasemisebenzini ukuthi ukwazi uboleka imali usebenza emsebenzini othile ukuthi ukwazi uyoboleka imali yokuthi wokhe wemuzi uthenge indlu kunoba uhambe uyoboleka imali ngo-27%. But khona abantu kakhulu ingase ukuthi bafumane bayovala amatyala or ngokuthi abantu abaninzi bafumane amatyala mhlawumbe umuntu ebegulelwe ngumntana or umakhulu bebambekile wasiwa kwingxaki ze-COVID. So abantu balungise ukuthi bazokwazi nje ukuthi baphefumule kwingxaki abakuzo. Yeyona nto ibalulekileyo leyo. But funeka ezinye izinto ukuthi zibe controlled kwazi abantu bangadlali ngemali because basekhona nabo ukuthi mhlawumbe umuntu afumane i-advice kuqala bekwe phansi ahlele ne-financial advisor.
Yes.
Simbonise abonisane ukuthi le mali xa ifikile iyaphi uzayisebenzisa njani zezo ziphi ingxaki zakho ngenza ngolu hlobo. Mhlawumbe kwezinye ke kuba
Yes, Kanti, maybe, sorry to cut you off there. I want Matthew to come in very quickly on that point that you're raising now, because Sizoya Ekefin Manje. Matthew, I mean, restrictions. A lot of people are calling for restrictions, like very tight measures around whether, if this move is actually allowed or goes through. They are suggesting that it needs to be seriously policed. I mean, there can't be any corruption, and also there needs to be very, very direct ways in that people, how are these people going to use that money? Are these people going to use the money for the reasons that they applied for this money? So what can you tell us around that? Have you given any restrictions to the access of the money or the distribution of this money? Is it going to go to creditors, or is it going to go to people's accounts as a lump sum? How is it going to pan out, sir?
No, look, we've had lots of discussions around it, and I think there are pros and cons to different options. It's still in the discussion stages. It's a difficult one. I mean, to what extent can a pension fund or can government police you? I think it'd be very difficult for government or the pension fund to go and see how you spend your money. Do you spend it paying off debts? Do you spend it paying medical bills or buying food, etc.? I think, to be honest with you, I mean, a law needs to be as simple as possible, otherwise it becomes very difficult to enforce. I don't think government would have the capacity to go and watch Tanti to see how he spends his money. I think that'll be impossible. I think we'd have to trust people, and I think most workers are responsible adults. They're mothers and fathers. I think we must trust people. And look, this is workers' money. It's not government's money. If a worker misspends it and goes gambling on a holiday,
the onus is on them.
Right. So I think we must trust adults to behave like adults and to act in their own interest. It would be very difficult to police anybody. We also want it to be as administratively as simple as possible. I don't think we want pension funds to go and check your credit record or check your bank statements, your salary slip. I think that would be very cumbersome. For me, that's why the best option is to give you a twin pot. A third for savings. You can access it when you need, at your discretion. And then 2/3 in your pension fund, which will be there when you retire and when you need to have a sufficient pension funds. Otherwise, it's going to be very complicated and very messy.
All right, Mr. Parks, let's leave it there. Mbugeli, let us take our final ad break. That's why I'm rushing my guests, because sasiphelelwa isikhathi ungayindawo. It is our final segment. I just want uKhanti to quickly wrap up ilokhuzana ama-views wakhe. Khanti, awusivalele nsizwa wena ucabanga ukuthi in all of this, iziphi izinto that people need to consider around this move? Very quickly. Khanti, can you hear us? All right, it seems like we've lost Mr. Khanti Baye there. Mr. Parks, maybe just, well, you might have more time now, so just last minute, just last minute questions. So, I mean, in terms of the turnaround time, I mean, going through NEDLAC and parliamentary processes, how much time are we looking at? I mean, I think I heard somebody say this could take up to a year, because there's also going to be some legislation that needs to be changed as well.
Look, I think at least a year and a half, to be honest, and I think we should be honest and pragmatic. We don't want to raise hopes, false hopes of workers that they can go to the ATM on Saturday morning to withdraw, because I think that's the worst thing to do. If government moves with speed, we think they can draft a bill in the next 3 months. They can bring it to NEDLAC. It'll take about 3 months to engage there and so forth. They must also allow a couple of months for public comments as well. But I think we would want to see a bill being tabled at Parliament before the State of the Nation address in February next year. And then you must give Parliament about a year to pass laws. It takes on average at least a year for Parliament to do so, because they also have to go through both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. There's public hearings, etc. It's not overnight. Then, of course, the President must then receive the bill. He must apply his mind, and then he must sign it. Then government has to promulgate it. And then, of course, you must give a little bit of notice to pension funds to prepare their rules, etc. So if I was to be honest, I think we must be honest with the public, I would say mid-2023. Amending laws is not an overnight thing, and I think we don't want to raise hopes that people that have been...
All right.
So I think 2023, mid-2023.
Mr. Parks, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And of course, I suppose COSATU will also let the public know when those public contributions and hearings are, of course, available. And ukuthi nina bantu ningenza njani ukuthi nibeke awenu amazwi nembono yenu ukuthi nina nifuna kwenzakalani. Niyezwa ke babukela ukuthi it's not something ekuthiwa mhlawumbe izokwenzeka manje. There are still talks, but it's a process end. Njengoba Mr. Parks aqeda uku-outline. Mbukeli, we couldn't finish everything we wanted to in this hour. Hey, kube ngathi isikhathi sami sincane kakhulu. Let me thank my studio guests for making isikhathi sabo to be with us today and the invaluable knowledge abasinikeze yona namhlanje. To you ekhaya, you can always usendele ama-topics ofuna ukuthi siwadiscusse. So kubona next week live on SABC 1 from uAlish uNonhlanhla wakajali. Ngithi nje sale kahle babukeli. Bye bye.